So, good afternoon and welcome to the sixth edition to learn the Erickson psychosocial stages of development. Today, we will discuss the sixth stage of development. Also, it is called the sixth period of development. Now, before I go into the details of the sixth stage, a very general overview about these stages or periods of development. As I told you, that these are lessons that our soul needs to learn if we have to be productive in our society, in this very complex human society. And with the learning of the lesson, there is a gain, and with the failing to learn the lesson, there is a loss and there is a consequence. Exactly like what happens to us in life when we are undergoing learning cognitive lessons. Now, are these stages really coinciding with the age of the individual? Well, the answer is no. By and large, one can put an age, but often, while the body ages, the psyche has not learned the lesson that is required for that age. So, for example, you may find individuals who may be 50-year-old, but psychologically, these individuals are still at the stage of infancy, or maybe at the stage of uh, much lower stages than what it is supposed to be at 50. Therefore, Erickson, in his original writing, has mentioned them as stages or periods and has not mentioned the age. The other thing that the learning and mastering through these lessons, that means through these stages, is usually a lifelong process. So you only get better and better and better. You only learn it better. So therefore, it is said that resolution of these phases is a lifelong process. Then, what happens in real life? In real life, as the body grows, as you age physically, this society also begins to perceive you to function in a particular manner, in a particular role. And therefore, the society per se also has expectations from you, and therefore it will throw up the challenges which are appropriate for your chronological age. Therefore, for example, if you are stuck or if you are not resolved, not learned, the stage 5, that means the idea of identity versus role diffusion, if that is not learned well, and you still haven't been able to resolve and master that issue, and if you are, say, for example, 40, then at 40, you are expected to take up the responsibility of the family in a much larger way, maybe also expected to take up the responsibility to an extended family, towards parents. So now you can imagine what happens. At this situation, in this situation, you are supposed to be at a much higher stage of development, but your soul, your psyche is still not able to master the earlier stage. So, each challenge in life, each stage in life forces us to revisit the previous unresolved stages, thereby giving us another opportunity, another chance to master that stage, to succeed in that stage, and then to move ahead. So, this is a process that keeps happening again and again and again till we die. So, this is very interesting that do we ever completely master any particular stage of development? Well, by and large, as the psych learns its lesson, you reasonably well master a particular stage of development, but there is always space for improvement. And you may always get stuck, you may always get fixated, you may always remain unresolved at a more earlier stage than the stage that your chronological age is supposed to be. Therefore, one will be a little soft in labeling the individual stuck at a particular age, and also you will be soft in classifying your remedies being stuck at a particular age. So there can be a possibility, and a fairly realistic possibility, that a particular remedy may span over one or two stages of uh, these developmental stages. And one need not be too rigid about it. It is only a hint, a clue to help us reach the remedy. We are studying all this so that we can map our materia medica into these stages. And since, as homeopaths, we have predominantly to work with the psyche and the psychological expressions of the human being, we are trying to understand it better. So, for me, largely, these stages definitely help me to understand the remedies better. It also helps me in my case taking to see the direction sometimes that I need in the case taking. So it will help me to understand the patient better. That is important. And of course, the second point is to create a map for the remedies, like what Dr. Mahesh Gandhi has done, like what Yakir has done. Nevertheless, one will have to be gentle with these classifications and not be very rigid on them. So we now move to today's discussion of the stage 6. The stage 6 of the psychosocial development is called the stage of intimacy versus isolation. Now, each of these words are very important and they are coined so that we can understand it's trying to convey something to us. So, the question of intimacy, what is intimacy? That is the first question we need to ask. And to create any degree of intimacy, what are the resources that the system requires so that it can form an intimate bond, intimate relationship? So, when we are talking about intimacy, we are talking about the physical closeness as well as the emotional and the psychological closeness that you experience with individuals other than your primary caregivers, which are your family members. Now, it is very important that to achieve closeness, physical closeness, as well as emotional closeness, you will have to be reasonably mastered your previous stage, that is the stage of identity versus role diffusion. Why? Because in the previous stage, one had to delineate, one had to crystallize as to who the individual, who I am. Only when you are clear about who I am, are you in a situation to integ- to integrate, which means to add someone else to your life. Now, the primary person here is the sexual partner, the loved one, and here we are referring to the adult genital sexuality. This is the primary part of it, but at the same time, the secondary fallout also is creating a bond, a relationship with other than just your sexual partner, which are friends, colleagues, at workplaces, in society per se. So, in this situation, when you have a stable sense of I, it is only then will you be able to allow the other person to get close enough to you. Why is that? Because letting the other person close enough, letting the other person in, requires you to deal with forces that are often opposite in nature to your own ego, to your own sense of self. In fact, the very integration of a man and a woman into a relationship, into an intimate relationship, essentially deals with bringing in, assimilating exactly the opposite gender, the opposite traits of the gender. Now imagine if you do not have a stable sense of I, a stable sense of who I am, then any introduction of person with opposite traits would be a threat to your sense of self. You need to ponder over this very carefully, because when you are allowing an intimate relationship to develop, you are bringing in the traits of the other person within you. That is why it is also called integration. In this, there is the requirement of the ego, of the self, to soften. Now, this is interesting what happens. In stage 5, the struggle is to crystallize who I am, which means to separate out, to create a good, proper, stable identity of yourself. And as soon as that is achieved, the very next stage of intimacy is to beginning of the dissolving of the ego. This is to be understood, because every relationship every intimate relationship that you form involves dissolving a part of yourself. Most so with your sexual partner. Less so, to a lesser extent, with your more intimate circle of friends and society with whom you are interacting and forming even a working relationship. So this is the interesting part of it. The very previous stage was the struggle to separate out, and here you are beginning to dissolve. So the intimacy with the other also creates and evokes the intimacy within your own self. This needs to be understood very clearly. Your inner conflicts that are not resolved of the previous stages will arise, will come to the forth as soon as the other person starts getting closer. Therefore, lot of people have lot of issues creating intimate relationships, because every intimate relationship is a threat to the ego, and the ego has to be resilient enough to integrate, to accept those qualities that are not considered self. So this is the beginning where the ego is softening, the ego is expanding from just yourself to the partner, to the friends, and to some colleagues which you are going to work with. Now, those who will ask me, this is what my understanding is for this stage 6. Now, coming to the homeopathic understanding of this stage, I am myself still not very clear. The reason is quite simple, because if I simply put up the rubric or the symptom sensation of isolation, which is when you do not learn this lesson of ability to create intimate bonds, what happens is you remain in a bubble. You remain isolated. And this is not conducive for productivity. This is not conducive for further growth as a human being and also being a productive member of the society. So if I take very simplistically the sensation of isolation rubric or forsaken or estranged from society, one needs to understand that these can, in isolation, can be the manifestations of the earlier stages of psychosocial development too. So since I am myself not very clear on this aspect of it, I am still toying down with the idea and how I will differentiate the isolation that comes up from this stage versus the isolation or the withdrawal that comes from the earlier stages, where earlier stages are not resolved. I am not very clear. I need to do my more further study and also further study the remedy on these aspects before I can get back to you on this. So I will leave this area at this stage and not discuss the homeopathic part of it, because the clarity still has not dawned onto me. And I will try and do it, and maybe in some of the future videos I can take up this part and share it with you as soon as it becomes clear to me. So if any questions, please feel free to ask. Whatever I understand about it, I will try and put it. So it's a short session for today. If any questions, please feel free. We are going to put up the recording and all the other stages. The recording of the previous stages is also available on our YouTube channel. Please subscribe, and you will also be able to see all these earlier stages that I have discussed along with their homeopathic understanding. In this stage, I am not sure, therefore I do not indulge into that area. Yes, so any questions? Let me see if okay. So I do not see any questions that are coming up. So we will stop here. Feel free to put up your questions even at a later stage when you see the recording of these videos. I will try and answer them. You can also directly message to me. If it is within my sphere of understanding, I will certainly get back to you. So goodbye and have a nice day. Do like the video and subscribe to this channel. Do share it with your friends who wish to understand this very interesting area of understanding the human psyche.